is Nick. I'm an alcoholic. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. Just a quick announcements. Food and fellowship always starts at 8 o'clock, so if you want to show up early and help set up or something like that, show up even earlier. We can always just help setting up. We have a sister group that meets on Thursday nights at 7:30, just right up the street at the Salem Church on Court Street. It's a big book breakdown. If you want information about that, come see me after. We have a Facebook page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, tons of great stuff on there, meetings and fellowship and events and workshops and picnics and all kinds of stuff going on. So if you want to be invited to that, please do so. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick and I am an alcoholic. Amen. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church at 301 North Main Street at 8 p.m. Food and fellowship start at 8 p.m. and 8:30 meeting. Okay. Food and fellowship, my goodness. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from the message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Yes, sir.
I'm Chris, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Chris, welcome.
I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic.
What's up, Bill? Welcome.
I'm not Mike, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Mike, welcome.
Hi, Amy, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Amy, welcome.
I'm Howard, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Howard, welcome.
Cody, alcoholic.
Hey, Cody, welcome.
Wyatt, alcoholic.
Why, welcome. And welcome to everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements from the floor for the good of AA? Yes, Mike.
No, sorry.
Just all right. Okay. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in a jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations, and all CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker of Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Subscribe and share, and you can find our speakers there. And we didn't assign anybody to read the preamble, so Joe, will you come up and please read the preamble?
I'm Joe, I'm an alcoholic. Welcome everybody. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contribution. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And now I've asked Jess to come up and read the 12 Steps of Recovery. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jess and I am an alcoholic. This is the 12 steps of AA recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made a direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thank you.
The 7th tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, inclining outside contributions. At this time, we'd like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses. And this group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. There is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and try to limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, to introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Tonight, we have Zack F. from the Newport Big Book Breakdown from Delaware.
Hi, I'm Zack. I'm an alcoholic. I wanted to start by saying I had a wonderful trip up here. I sat in traffic, and then someone threw what looked like an Italian sub at my car on 476, and then I go to get changed to put this suit on, and I break the top button. So obviously I'm in the right spot. I have a sobriety date. It's May 1st, 2018. That was not a day I chose on my daily planner to get sober. It was just the day that I showed up because I had nowhere else to go. I do have a sponsor, and he knows he's my sponsor, and I remain sponsorable after all this time. I do have a home group. It's called Newport Big Book Breakdown. It's an awesome group. We get about 120 people a week, and we break the big book down line by line, page by page for people like me who can't understand it. And I do have the honor and privilege of taking other men through the steps who have in turn took other men through the steps who have in turn took other men through the steps. So I have a whole sponsor lineage down in Delaware, which is a pretty amazing thing for a guy 5 years ago that nobody even wanted to be around. So I'm going to break it down just how, like it says, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, right? What it was like, it started very early for me. I don't want to say that I was an alcoholic from birth, because I don't know. There's literally people out there right now who are alcoholics and they don't know it because they haven't picked up a drink. But I do know that I suffered from a malady since birth, and it came out in my experience as just uncomfortability with who I was, right? When I was young, I was short and skinny. My last name's Ferry, so like obviously I didn't have a lot of friends. And I listened to like emo music, and I was like a skateboarder, so I was like a sad kid at heart. And like it was terrible. I just didn't want to be me, right? I don't know if you guys have ever felt that before, but it's a terrible place to be, right? And I got this older Irish twin brother. His name's Nate. He's in the program too, right? And I just wanted to be Nate. Nate was cool. He had a bunch of friends. They like played Dungeons and Dragons and all sorts of cool things that like I just couldn't get into, but I really wanted to. So living in someone else's shadow, again, is a terrible place to be, right? My sponsor likes to refer to it as the itchy sweater complex, right? Where you're just not comfortable in your own skin. And I lived with that for a long time. And when I was young, I went to a bunch of doctors because they couldn't figure out why I was so different than everyone else. And they labeled it as depression or ADHD or all these things. And I was just suffering, right? And I remember the first time I ever had that moment where I felt like I arrived, right? So back in the 90s, sorry to date myself, but in the 90s, there's this place in Delaware, it's called the Wilmington Ice Skating Rink, right? And it was literally the jump off, right? There was an ice skating rink, and there's a dance floor, and they were like playing like Casey and JoJo and Usher, and like, it was the place to be, right? So I'm with my older brother and all his friends, and they started drinking before they went in the place, right? And I remember that, like, at this time, like, I would do anything to get the results that he got, right? So if his friends were like, come on, come drink with us, then I was going to drink with him. Absolutely, why not? If I get the results that my brother gets, I'm going to do whatever he does, right? So I do a couple shots out front. I go inside, and there was this girl in high school, and her name was Kate, right? And this girl was absolutely the most gorgeous girl I've ever seen in my life, right? The one that like all the guys would like flock to, and I would like turn around and walk away from. Like that was her, right? So I get these drinks in me, and I go up on the dance floor, and I see Kate, and I'm like, yo, Kate, come over here and sit with me. And she literally came over and sat with me. And like I knew right then and there that there was some power that was involved in this stuff. So as I'm growing older, I'm starting to realize something that like when I started drinking, it was a lot of fun with zero consequences, right? And as that pendulum started to swing, I noticed things like my friends would be like, let's go to this party and get drunk. And I'd be like, why? I can get drunk at home and then I'll have to share, you know? And they would stop drinking after Sunday, and I'd be like, why are we not drinking on Monday in school? I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me, right? And this stuff started to catch up with me really early on. And of course, it progressed for me and went in a different direction, right? But it was all the same thing. I started messing around with stuff that I shouldn't have been touching, and I developed that habit, right? And in 2006 is when it really caught up to me, right? Consistently using no matter what, right? And it led me to my first prison term, right? So in 2006, I got sentenced to 10 years in Pennsylvania, right? And for you guys that haven't experienced jail, I absolutely don't recommend it, not one bit. It is not fun, and remember, I'm short, I'm skinny, and my last name's Ferry, so not a place for me to be, right? So I get the Grand Pennsylvania prison tour where you go and, you know, you go to Graterford, Camp Hill, Frackville, Retreat, and then I went to Chester. I did all these things, and I stayed totally abstinent the whole time I was in there, right? So in 2016, when I got out, I noticed something, right? I went, first stop you guys make when you get out of prison is probation, right? When I get out, I go to probation. My probation officer's name was Marty. Marty tells me he needs a urine. He tells me to pee in the cup, right? So I pee in the cup, and as soon as I walked out the door, my brain tells me I got 7 days, right? Now this is 10 years separated, right? And we talk about this in the big book, the difference between like the problem and a dilemma, right? And like this was a dilemma, and I didn't even know what I was suffering from. So like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I used, everything's good. Thursday, I'm like reading up about how you can like exercise and drink a ton of water, and I'm like, yeah, I can get one more day out of that, right? So then I remember on Thursday, I'm reading up about like niacin and like the GNC drink, and I'm like, yeah, I can just use this stuff and I'll be fine, right? And then Friday, I'm Googling like the Wizinator. For you guys that don't know what that is, you can Google it when you get out of here, right? And I'm going to the local clinic to try and buy clean pee off someone, right? And then by Saturday, I'm like, screw it. It's already over. I'm going on the run, right? So this led me to a couple more prison tours. I did a third of my life in prison. I'm about to be 39, so you can do the math yourself, right? In and out of jail, basically doing life on the installment plan as opposed to just paying it all up front, right? So like this led me to, when I got out of my last prison sentence, they put me in a halfway house that was dead center in the middle of North Philadelphia. And guys from Wilmington don't really experience North Philadelphia. But when I did, I was like, man, I arrived. This is my tribe, right? So I ended up spending about 18 months down there homeless, living under a bridge, you know, doing whatever you got to do to get whatever you got to get, right? And one day, I hit that point where like what I was using wasn't working. Stopped working. Wasn't doing anything for me. I was kind of just like maintaining, right? And the only other option I had was to either jump off a bridge or continue to use. And I hit that turning point, and I decided to do something different, right? So I go up to this cop, and he's right on Kensington Ave, and I'm like, hey man, what's up? And he's like, what's up, buddy? And I'm like, hey, I got warrants in Delaware. you think you could take me in? And he's like, well, this is new, but yeah, absolutely, I'll take you in. But like, I knew he was a nice guy, right? Because he like cuffed me in the front. For you guys that have been locked up, if they do that, they're really nice guys. Cuffs me in the front, gives me a cigarette. He's like, just sit here for a little while and we'll take you in, go down the roundhouse. So he takes me down the roundhouse, right? And you don't see a judge until like 2:30 in the morning. So I go to a video court and the judge is there. And he's like, Mr. Fair, you have extraditable warrants in Delaware, right? And then I hear, like, he starts talking. I hear a guy in the background talking, right? And I'm like looking, and it's the cop who arrested me at 11 o'clock in the morning, right? And I was like, what is this guy doing here, right? So he goes, Your Honor, I'd like to make a request. And she's like, okay, make your request. And he's like, if I take him to treatment right now, right, and he doesn't leave my custody, will you release him on ROR bail, right? So ROR, for you guys that don't know, is released on your own recognizance, right? It's basically get out of jail free card. So the judge is like, you know what? Never heard someone say something like this, so I'm going to give you a chance and I'm going to release you on ROR. But you can't leave the building until you're escorted out. And I said, sounds great, because I'm really not feeling good. Whatever you say, I'll do, right? So the cop takes me, and he takes me to a treatment center called Bowling Green. So for you guys that haven't been to Bowling Green, again, I don't recommend it, right? If you gotta go, you gotta go, right? People get clean at last stop, so it's all about what you're doing, right? So I'm like 106 pounds. I got 3 pairs of boxers and 2 Parliament lights, and that's what I showed up to rehab with, right? So I get there, and I go through the detox stage, right? And I start to get my legs back. And the first day I'm there, I noticed something that I've never seen before, right? These guys, or girls, have like 10 days sober, and they're happy. I've never experienced that before, right? Because like people get sober, and they look amazing, like fantastic, right? And I get sober, and I feel worse. And I don't understand what's going on, right? I don't understand how they can be playing volleyball in their bare feet, and they got like 9 days sober, and I got like 6 days sober, and I can barely stand up, right? So like as I move through the treatment center, you know, you go to different stages of the treatment center, and I'm getting a couple days clean, and there's this guy, and his name's Charlie, right? And like, Charlie is a very different type person, right? He's like red hair, looks like Jesus. He's like, always comes in muscle shirts. He's like a surfer guy. And he'll always come in here into this treatment center, and he'd always tell the same story, right? But it was really funny. He used to talk about this invisible boat, right? And he would always say, I want you to like imagine yourself being dropped into an ocean, right? And like some of you guys are bigger than others, or some of you guys might have a little bit more knowledge about swimming, but if we pretend the ocean is your addiction, eventually you're going to start drowning no matter what. You can't make it. No one can. Even Olympic swimmers can't make it, right? So he said, just imagine me coming over the horizon, and I'm floating 6 inches above the water with absolutely nothing, and I'm going like this. And I'm just cruising along, right? And I pull up to you and say, hey, I'm Charlie from AA. And I'm like, this is just insane, right? This is crazy. There's no possible way that this works. Don't know what's going on there, but I'm really not interested. And he's like, okay, I'll see you on the way back, right? So then I'm like, just pretend like you're really drowning, like you're sucking in water and everything, and all of a sudden you see what looks like the black pearl pulling up, right? And it pulls up to you, and on the side of it, it says detox. It's like held together with like nails and tissue paper and gum, right? And they throw you a rope, and they pull you up, and they're like, go ahead in the basement. You know, here's some comfort meds. We'll see you in 5 days, right? So 5 days later, they come down, they drag you out of your room, and they throw you back in the ocean, right? So like eventually you start drowning again, right? And then all of a sudden on the horizon you see this Disney cruise ship, right? And it pulls up, and you can hear like music on it, and there's like lights going, and it says 30-day treatment, right? And you're like, there's my ride. They throw you a life vest, they pull you up, and there's like snack time, and the opposite sex, and like coloring books and music and therapy and all these things and all this information, right? But after 30 days, what do? They throw you back in the ocean, right? But now, you know, you've learned a little bit about yourself, right? About how to swim or how to float on your back and use your legs or just your arms, right? You learn breathing techniques, and you got your relapse prevention and your trigger floaties on, right? But eventually, what starts happening? You're going to start drowning again, no matter what, right? And then here comes Charlie again, right? And he says, like, even though you might not understand what's going on in AA or think anything about it, it works, right? He's like, I'm literally floating in an invisible boat right past you. Maybe you should give it a shot, right? And I like really held on to that, right? Because it was a great story and it was really funny, but it like has a lot of truth behind it. It's like treatment is not enough for guys like me. You know, prison, I've done it. It's not enough for guys like me, right? I'm still suffering, right? And like when they talk about in the doctor's opinion, like fighting the physical side of this thing, right? If it was just a physical disease, then all my prison term, I would have done one and I would have been done, right? Or Nancy Reagan's just don't do it would have worked, but it doesn't, right? So like I remember there was this guy named Steve, and he was from like Oxford Houses, and he's like, comes up to me one time after speaking, he's like, where are you going when you get out? I was like, I don't know. He's like, you should probably go to a sobriety house. I was like, sounds like a good idea, but like I remember all those like horror stories in the rehab about Oxford Houses and sobriety houses and how they're managed and the terrible things they did to all these people, right? But I told him, I said, look, man, I just really need a place to go, man. I'm not really interested in anything else. I just need somewhere to get my feet planted. And he's like, you're not going to do the work? And I was like, what's the work? And he's like, you know what, dude? He's like, you know, I see a lot of guys come into treatment centers that are like you, right? Who just want to go back to their job or to their wife or to their kids or their girlfriends, right? And then I see them in the obituary 2 weeks later. But good luck to you. That's what he said to me. And I was like, wow. But I didn't say it out loud because I can't like talk to people like that. I like said it up here. And I was like, wow. I was like all pissed off. I was like, man. So I remember I went back to my room and I'm like having conversations in my head with this guy and he's not even there, right? And I'm like, well, if he would have said this, I would have said this. And I'm like talking about it and there's like an analog clock like that one and it's like ticking in the room, right? And I felt like Edgar Allan Poe in there, and I don't know if you guys understand that, but that's what I felt like, right? And like that was like a mini experience for me, right? Because guess what I showed up to meetings with? Resentment. That's what I did. And I wish I could tell you that like I had the right intentions when I came to AA, that I was like really going to do it this time. To be honest with you, I didn't have any cigarettes, and that's why I came here. And that's the God's honest truth, right? And I'm like sitting in the back, right? I got like my hood up. I didn't have a phone at the time, right? And I'm like asking people for rides and for cigarettes, and I'm kind of just like floating on the surface of AA. And like I heard what all that like podium talk and, you know, find God or, you know, do a 90 and 90, what my 21-year-old counselor told me how to get sober with a 1-year degree, right? So like I was like, all right, well, we'll start. I kind of liked meetings because I like knew I saw something in the beginning, right? Where like I would go to a meeting and I would feel like I'd feel completely terrible, right? And I would go in there and there'd be some random guy and he's like literally telling my story while I'm in there, right? And I'm like, this is just weird, right? And I would always leave feeling better. And I was like, well, there's something going on here. I don't really know what, but I'm gonna stick around and check it out, right? So I did what they told me to do, right? I did the 90 and 90 and I, you know, met a bunch of people and I fellowshipped, right? But I didn't do the work. And it took me about 9 months, right? Where I'm sitting on a park bench out front of a meeting and I feel the same way that I felt in North Philly, that I was either gonna jump off a bridge or I was gonna use, right? And this guy comes up to me, and this, I tell you, that I am dead serious about this, the weirdest guy in AA I've ever seen. The weirdest, right? So he always wore a suit, to every single meeting, right? And he had like 3 fingers in the big book at all times, right? And I would see him, I'd be like, oh, we're getting super sober tonight, right? And like, this guy comes up to me and I'm sitting on this park bench. I'm like in tears, like not crying, but you know what I'm talking about, like to that point, like in tears where I just want to die, right? And he comes up to me and he's like, what's up, Zach? I'm like, hey man, what's up? He's like, you look like you could use a drink. And I was like, I absolutely could. And he's like, we have like a thing for that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm going to meetings. And he's like, I swear to you, he goes, what is Alcoholics Anonymous to you? I was like, it's like meetings. And he's like, that's funny. He's like, seems like it's the title of a book to me. And I was like, huh. And he's like, do you have a book? And I was like, no. And I swear to you, he like pulls one out of his back pocket. Not like a little red one, you know what I'm talking about? Or the little blue ones, whatever you guys use, right? But like a full big book. And he slaps it on my lap and he's like, guess what? And I was like, what? He's like, I'm your sponsor. We're gonna do some work, right? And he was like, since you're a know-it-all, won't you tell me what step 1 means? And I was like, okay. He's like, read up to page 44. Tell me what you find out. And I'm like, cool. So I went home, I'm like reading, right? And I got all the answers because, I'm full of myself. I know everything, right? And I still carry the notebook around with me. And it's really actually a good read 5 years later, right? And it basically states nothing out of the big book. It just says, I can't drink anymore, right? And I go down and I have it all planned out, and we meet at this local coffee shop, and right, and I'm already smashed in the 5th gear on him, right? Just lay it out, both barrels at him, right? And he sits there and he listens to it, and like I thought it was so good what I did, like I almost teared up. That's how good it was, my little step 1 dissertation, right? And he sits there and he listens to me, he shakes his head and goes, yeah, you're totally wrong. And I was like, okay. And he's like, what's it say on the first paragraph of page 44? And he says, you need to know the difference between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic, and you need to know what it means when you raise your hand and say you're an alcoholic. That's most important, right? And we went through it page by page, line by line, right? And I understood the 3-fold disease, right? And I understood the doctor's opinion and Bill's story and all these things, like I got it, right? And I understand that, like, if I don't have a spiritual solution to this problem, then I will absolutely drink again. And it doesn't matter how much time is put in between me and a drink, right? Eventually, my brain will tell me that I can do one and get away with it. Absolutely. Why not? You can make it to North Philly on your lunch break, So I really start pounding into this work, man, right? And I understand the problem, and I understand I can't fix myself, right? And we start to get closer to step 3, which I am absolutely not cool with, right? I'm open-minded to the idea that there is something greater than me, but I just don't think that it works for me, right? I've had situations where I've gotten on both my knees and prayed, right? And said, God, please, I'll go to church every Sunday and read the Bible if you get my bail lower. Or if you, just stop me from doing this. And he didn't show up then. Why is he going to show up now, right? And like, my sponsor is very tough when he talks to me, and I can't curse here, so like I'm going to have to keep it like PG-13, right? And so he said, Zach, there's one thing about God that me and him have in common. And I was like, what's that? And he said, there's just something about you that pisses us off. Right? And I'm like, okay. And he's like, Zach, God's been working through you your whole life. Just because you don't cooperate doesn't mean that he's not real. Right? He's like, you're begging God for situations to give you courage, and he puts you in a situation to be courageous, and you just don't show up, right? And like that was swallowing a lot to me, trying to understand, this whole God concept. And he's like, Zach, you're overthinking it, right? He's like, we're just going to do a little science experiment, right? Where I'm going to give you an idea, and I really don't care if you believe in it or not, right? And what we're going to do is you're going to act as if a person who is seeking God within and portraying God without, right? And you're going to do everything that you do is going to be based off the decision whether someone with God in their life would do this, and you tell me if he shows up, right? And I was like, I can get with that. I can do that. And he's like, all right, start praying. And I was like, wait a minute. Wait. You want me to pray to a God that I don't even believe in? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, well, wouldn't that make me a hypocrite? And he's like, you've been a hypocrite all your life. Try something different. And I was like, okay. So remember, I'm at this Oxford house, right? And the Oxford house got like 9 guys who are like 8 times my size, and all they do is chase girls and go to the gym. So I'm like really afraid to pray in front of them. So like I literally would go into the bathroom and like hide in the corner of the shower. And I would go in there and I'd get on my knees with like shower shoes on my knees. If you've been in a halfway house, you know what I'm talking about, right? And I'd sit in there and I'd say, God, like if you are real, it'd be nice if you showed up, right? And I was like, I'm here for duty, boots tied, whatever you want me to do, I'm willing to do it, right? And it was really funny because like when I started doing this, when I did the 3rd step prayer with my sponsor, really honestly the only thing I really knew was who to get rides from meetings from, the definition of powerless and unmanageability, and a ton of war stories. And like that's the information I came into with step 3, right? And I took that prayer, and really honestly the reason why I took it is because my sponsor said I can't start working on my 4th step until I do it. So I was like, all right, I'm here, let's go, let's do this, right? But it was so funny because little things started to change in my life, right? And it wasn't like a burning bush or a white light experience. It was more like people started asking me for advice. And I'm like, that's weird. Because like, you wouldn't even want to be around me 2 years ago. But yet now I'm getting asked advice, and I like didn't file that in like the coincidence file or the luck file. I kind of put it into this God file, right? And then it was like, yo, what are you doing this weekend? You want to hang out? And I was like, people want to hang out with me? That's crazy. I've never heard that before, right? And like I started like making these friends, and like my friend Scott, who he's a big influence on my life, man. He like, so when we were in high school, we were in addiction together, constantly using, right? And like he met this girlfriend, and she gave him the ultimatum. She's not one of us. She was like, look, dude, if you're going to live this life, I'm done, right? And he put it down and he walked away. And I was like, whoa. And then I'm thinking in my head, this is how sick I am. I'm thinking in my head, like, well, if a girl loved me like that, I'd do that too, But like this guy, right, he told me when he dropped me off to do my 10-year sentence, right? And he was like, dude, as much as I love you, man, I just can't be around you. My life's going a different direction, right? And then this guy's like, he calls me, he's like, yo, man, I heard you're doing really good. Come by the house. And I'm like a habitual burglar, right? And he's like, come to my house. And I'm like, holy crap, right? And like, things like that started to change for me, and I knew that like I was gaining this power, right? Because I was tapped into it, right? I wasn't blocked off by a lot of different things that were in my life prior, and I was open-minded to the idea, and once that happened, it's like God came into my life and just started flicking away things, like things that I thought or things I was doing, and just started pushing them away, right? So then I got to this scary 4-step, right? And we all know it's super scary to write stuff down on a piece of paper. Okay, just so we're all on the same page. My sponsor gives me the 4-step paperwork. He says, Zach, I want you to take a notebook, and I want you to write 2 columns on one side, 2 columns on the other side. Give me a date when you're going to be done. And I was like, I don't know, like a month? He was like, I won't be your sponsor in a month. He said, you got 14 days, right? And I'm like, okay, let's get to work. So like, I'm like pounding this 4-step out, man. I'm using every resource I have, like Facebook, Instagram, like all things, old newspaper articles for my situation, right? And like, get this 4-step done. I'm done on the 13th day. And he's like, come to my house, right? So I come to his house and I got a ton of resentments and a ton of fear and a ton of sex conduct. And I like go to his house and it was so weird, right? Because I go and he has like a basement where he does like step work. And I go down in the basement, right? And he's got like one light on, and he has like one of those old green like accountant visors. And he's got like 2 laptops and like 2 notebooks and like this huge study guide big book. And I'm like, what is going on down here? And he's like, have a seat, right? So for my 5th step, I really had to swallow and digest a lot of truths about myself. He's like, Zach, there's one common denominator that comes with every one of your resentments. Guess what it is? And I was like, what is it, resentment? And he's like, no, it's you. Every single one of them. For you guys, if you're not on your 5th step, right, don't get scared of it, right? Because like you get down to causes and conditions, right? And you like really learn a lot about yourself and what you do and why you do it, right? And that was for me, and I kept questioning, like, why do you want to know everyone that I've ever had sex with? It doesn't make sense to me. And he's like, well, let's take a deeper look at it, right? And he's like, so I want you to just do me a little favor, and I want you to put a check mark next to everyone you ever cheated on. And I'm like, whoa, put all these check marks. And he's like, how about a check mark next to the people who you lied to get what you want? And I'm like, oh my God. He's like, as you can see, we're not looking at sex as an action, we're looking at sex conduct, which is behavior. And look at this behavior that you have, right? And we took this list of resentment and fear, and I got the finger pointed at me the whole time, right? And then we made a list of these character defects, right? So my sponsor always refers to 6 and 7 as the Dead Sea Scrolls of AA. That's what he says it is, right? Ton of information, 2 little paragraphs, right? And like, when we did 6 and 7, man, is when I really started to really swallow some things, right? Because like the 7-step prayer for you guys is the prayer that I typically have to go back to the most, right? In my lengths of sobriety. And the reason that is like, so he told me, this is what he told me. He said, if I am, right, if I'm a water bottle inspector, right? And he said, I take a look at this water bottle and I see that the cap's not on tight. I check my little list, right? And it looks like the sticker's coming off. I check that. And he said the bottom's a little bent. I check that. What happens next? Do I throw it out? He said, no, I give it back to manufacturing. And I say, fix these problems, right? He said, I'm not asking you to do anything, right? He says, you don't have the power to remove these defects of character, but you're the stirrer of your behavior, right? So he's saying, like, when you take this 7-step prayer and you sign this agreement with God that says, if you give me the strength to make it past this point, you will do whatever you want. You are absolutely saying to him that I will work on defects of character, right? I will be the stirrer of my behavior, right? But I can't do anything that controls them other than my behavior. That makes sense to you guys, right? If I say to God, like, take these defects of character, use them for good or for bad, right? I can't go with a list and say, God, here's my list of character defects, right? And I want you to notice that they're in numerical order, right? And we're going to start at the top and then work our way down, and we can leave financing and lust at the bottom. It just doesn't work like that, right? I'm saying, God, you give me strength and I will serve you, and you do what you want with my character defects, right? So if I got to lie and tell someone that Bowling Green is an amazing treatment center and it's the only one that worked for me to get them into treatment, that's God's will, not mine, right? Because like me as a person, is I can be loved, kind, and caring, right? For selfish reasons. I can say, Mom, yeah, absolutely, I'll come over there and cut the grass, right? I can do your laundry and I'll bring up the groceries. Can I get $60, right? And like, we have to look at both sides of this coin, right? And say, like, you take control, God. If you make it, you give me the power to, because I know what's coming next. I read ahead, right? But if you give me the power to make it through that, man, I'll serve you. I'll show up whenever you want, wherever you want. You just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? So we got to 8 and 9. So I'm going to tell you guys 2 amends stories, right? Because they're the most powerful thing, I think, in AA, right? I didn't have that experience after my 4th and 5th step, right? But like, I'll tell you, when I got to my amends, God showed up. Like lightning, riding a lightning bolt in my life, showed right up, right? So I have two. So my first amends was to this guy, Jason, and Jason is in the program, and he gives me permission to speak about this, right? So before I went into treatment, I had robbed Jason for $5,600, right? I worked for him. He didn't come in on a Friday when I was supposed to get paid, and I'm using, so I'm like, I'm gonna write my own check. So I write that check. He comes on my house on Saturday, drops off the other check, and I was like, I'll keep them both. And then I completely ran, right? So God's sixth sense of humor, right? I show up to AA in Delaware, and guess who's at every single meeting I go to? Jason. And not only is he at every single meeting I go to, but he's in direct eye contact with me the entire time. And I am not making this up, because I even tested the theory, and I was like, in my head, like, when I talk about this, people aren't going to believe me, right? So like one day I go to a meeting and there's Jason, he's sitting in the back, direct eye contact, and I'm like, I'm going to turn my chair 180 degrees. And I turn it, and there's a TV on the wall, and the reflection of the TV is his eyes. I can't make this up, right? So a couple meetings, like, we almost like got into some arguments because I would kind of like try to dip out of there before getting him outside for the meeting after the meeting, right? Sometimes he'd be there and be like, yo, come here. And, he's huge. I mean, huge, right? And I was scared to death, right? So my sponsor, he was more interested in my second amends because I had warrants, obviously, right? Because I ran when I got out of jail. And turns out the reason why my sponsor wears a suit all the time is because he's a district attorney. Yeah. So he's like, you should probably turn yourself in. I was like, I'm helping a lot of people out here, man. That's gonna cause some harm. He's like, absolutely not working for that one. And I was like, cool, right? So I'm like, let me make this amends to Jason, and then we'll go to that amends, and I'll turn myself in. He's like, sounds good to me. So I call Jason, right? I'm like, hey, Jason, it's Zack. He's like, I've been waiting for this. And I was like, oh, I'd like to meet up with you and make an amends. He's like, meet me out back of Big Book, 8:30. Hangs up. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, like, so Big Book's like a church, and like in the back, there's a graveyard. It's like one street that goes up there. There ain't no lights back there, right? And it's absolutely not the best spot to make an amends, right? But I call my older brother. He's like, yo, what are you doing? I was like, I gotta go make an amends. He was like, I'll be there 3 minutes, right? He lives like 4 miles from me and literally drives a Toyota Echo, right? Comes to my house in 3 minutes. I don't know how he made it. We used to call this car the used bar of soda, right? That's what it looked like, right? And he like pulls up and the shocks are bad, and he almost like turns up on me. He's like, get in, let's do this, right? So like we're driving along and I'm scared, right? I'm nervous, praying. I just can't get rid of this fear, right? And I like have this list in my pocket because my sponsor always makes me write out my amends because he knows that I have a tendency to like overthink things before I speak. And like if I was in the parking lot thinking about what I'm going to say to you guys, I'd come up here and be like, Same situation, especially in one of the scariest situations of your life, you're probably going to stutter a little bit. So he's like, make sure you write it down, have it in your pocket, right? So I'm in the car. So we pull up to Big Book, right? And my brother, he's in AA too, man, and he's my older brother, so he likes to mess with me, right? So he pulls up to the church and he just stops, right? And it's like literally probably a quarter-mile walk. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, get out. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you're not gonna go up there with me? And he's like, God's got your back, get out of the car, right? So I'm like, oh my God, I get out of the car. I start walking in front of the car and he turns the high beams on to make the situation even worse, right? And I see Jason, he's off on the horizon, and he has like a GMC Yukon, he's got like the fog lights on, he's standing there like this, and his muscles are bigger than my head. And I'm like, I am absolutely gonna get beat up, 100%, right? But I told God, I said, you give me the power to make it through this, dude, I'm gonna work for you, I promise. You got my word, right? So I walk up to Jason, and he's standing there, and I go in my pocket, and I'm like, get this list out, and I'm like shaking, And like, I'm here to make an amends. And he's like, let me hear it. And I start talking. I rattle everything I did off. These are the defects that I displayed in the situation. And then we asked that question, right? For you guys that are making your amends, I'm like, is there anything else? And he's like, oh, absolutely, right? And he had me there for like 25 minutes. Just like, finger in the face, you did this. It's just like, I don't want to get into details, but it's just the ripple effects of my actions that I don't see, right? And like the harms that I've caused by one person and how it affects so many people, right? And I'm like sitting there with my head down, man, and I'm like, my sponsor is very adamant about not saying you're sorry. It's like, they don't want to hear it, right? They want to see you doing something different, right? So I said to him, so how do I make it right? And he's like, honestly, I'm not really worried about the money, right? And he's like, I had to work through a lot of resentment with my sponsor in this situation, and I just want you to get one person through the steps, and that's all I want you to do. And I was like, man, that's powerful, right? Gets better, right? So, next amends, right? The sponsor's like, all right, you ready to make the amends to the judge? And I'm like, well, not really. And he's like, okay. He's like, when do you want to do it? I'm like, well, can you give me a week? And he's like, that's funny, I'm out front. And I was like, wait, you're out front? And he literally was out front of my house. He's like, get in, we're gonna go turn yourself in. So I walk into the police station, right? Any lengths, this is what I keep saying to myself in my head, any lengths, right? I walk in the police station, and cop's at the front desk, and I'm like, I'm here to turn myself in. And he said the same thing that cop in North Philly said. Well, this is different, but okay, come on in the back, right? So I go in the back, I get locked up. Now, I have a pretty extensive track record, right? So I don't get the luxuries like of prison, like work release or like low bail. Typically it's a one-shot deal for me, right? So in Delaware, you have the ability to bail out on probation violations, right? And typically people get very low ones. I mean, I had no police contact for 2 years. I'm like, I'm gonna get like a low bail. I'm just gonna bail out and go see the judge, right? I get this judge who's very well known for not doing that in Delaware, and I get a $30,000 cash bail. It means I can't put 10% down. If I don't have 30 grand cash or a house, I'm not getting out. And I was like, well, at least I'm comfortable here. I know how to do it, so we're gonna sit for a little while. So, when you go into jail, you put in a phone list, right? It's got to get approved. Takes like 2 weeks. You're in intake. You're like 23 in 1, which means for you non-jail guys, it means you're in for 23 hours. You get an hour out every day, right? So I'm sitting in there. I put my phone list in. I finally get it back, and I call my girlfriend at the time, right? And she's like, "Hey, you got your phone list in?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "You're never going to believe this, right?" So there was a guy in AA. His name's Chuck. And this kid kept getting sick, like early in my sobriety, right? And they couldn't figure out why this kid kept getting sick. And it turns out that he had a mold in his attic, right? That was like killing his kid because the kid was allergic to it. And when they finally found it out, he had to like leave that night, leave the house, right? Stay in a hotel room, get an apartment, move all the stuff out of his house, mold wipe it, move it into his apartment, right? And then sell that house and get another house and move all the stuff back. So for about 8 months of my sobriety, 7 days a week, I was working, cleaning gutters, get off, do a 10-hour day, get dropped off at his house or take the bus to his house, and we would just be moving furniture for what felt like forever, right? And I didn't ask this guy anything, and I really honestly owe this guy Chuck a lot because he's the one who unlocked the door of the first meeting that I went to. So I always take that as high regard, right? So like I didn't ask him for anything, we did the work. So my girlfriend says, Chuck started a GoFundMe for your bail, and they had it in 45 minutes, 30K. I was like, what? What? Right? Bailed me out that day. I couldn't believe it, dude. So like, I haven't had my license since 2006, right? Since I got locked up the first time. You guys, your Pennsylvania laws are crazy. I got 6 months suspended, right? And then I go there 12 years later, and they're like, yeah, your license was suspended for 6 months in 2006. I'm like, and they're like, yeah, you didn't fill out the paperwork. And I'm like, oh my God. fill out the paperwork, the time goes away, right? And this is the first time since 2006 I get my license. I'm so stoked, right? I like take the bus, grab a new white t-shirt from the gas station. I like my roommates like shape me up looking good. I do some push-ups out in the parking lot because I know that picture's coming. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? So I go in there and I snap the picture, boom, get my license. I'm in the parking lot and I'm so stoked, right? And my phone rings and it's Jason. And I'm like, wonder what I did now. I pick up the phone. Jason's like, what's up, man? I'm like, what's going on? He's like, what are you doing for work? I'm like, I work for a company cleaning gutters. That's what I do, 10 hours a day, right? And he's like, well, why don't you come in for an interview at my business, right? So Jason owns a multi-million-dollar construction business in Delaware, right? And he comes in, he's like, I want you to just have a better life, right? So he gives me a job as a salesman, right? And I don't know construction. I've never picked up a hammer in my life, right? My first year I sell 1.8 million in sales for a guy who I robbed for $5,600 and made an amends in the back of a parking lot, and I thought I was going to get beat up, and I still work for this guy this day, right? And like, that's the power of amends, right? Because you tell me any human power had anything to do with that. I just can't figure it out, right? It's God all the way. And that's the 9-step promises when they come true in your life. Like, you do the 9-step you do the 9th step halfway through, the 9-step promises come true. They're absolutely not maybes. They are 100% promises, right? And every single one of them promises came true after my second amends. And I was hungry, right? I did 8 amends in one day, drive around with my sponsor. Because like the power from that was the most powerful thing in AA, right? I ended up going back in front of that judge, and I had 3 years, level 3 with tasks. And I walked in, because this judge told me that if she ever saw me again, she would bury me under the jail. That was her exact words, right? I walk in, and she's like, oh, Mr. Ferry, good to see you. I'm like, good to see you, Your Honor. She's like, 2 years, no police contact, that's a record for you. And I said, thank you very much. And I had a bunch of letters from people in AA and my bosses and friends, and she read all these letters, man. She took one look at me, and she's like, last time I saw you, you were a completely different person. And like, you're on the right path, right? And who am I to stop that? She ended up taking and resentencing me for my 3 years, level 3 with tasks, to 1 year, level 1 unsupervised. She said, I'll give you enough rope, hang yourself, see what you can do. And I walked it off. And for a guy like me, I've been on paper since 2006. And that's insanity to me, right? So we get to 10, 11, and 12, and I know I took up a lot of time. The best way to describe 10, 11, and 12 to me is I consistently live in 10, 11, and 12, right? I always thought that meditation and the spirituality and improving this conscious contact with God, right, meant that I'd like float 6 inches above the ground and take a yoga class and everything would be amazing, right? I learned a lot about prayer, and I learned a lot about meditation, right? For me, the spirituality side of this is like a bridge to a better life, and you don't have to get stuck on the bridge, right? There's guided meditation and prayers that are in the big book that you can use, or if you find something that works for you. I got friends who do Reiki, I got friends who do hot yoga, they play with like crystals. There's all sorts of things that, like, if you're into it, I say go for it. If it makes you have an approved contact with God of your understanding, then who am I to say no? I'm not here to judge anyone's spirituality. What works for me is Wally P and his 2-way prayer. That's always worked for me. I have guided meditations on 11 step that you can literally live in on YouTube, right? You can do one a day for the rest of your life. That's how many videos there are, right? And that works for me. I would always suggest to go with what your sponsor tells you, because obviously he's smarter than you, right? So, and the 12th step is probably the most important thing in my life. And my sponsor was very big on taking the responsibility pledge and meaning it, right? And I walk guys through the steps, man, and they walk other guys through the steps, and I see miracles every single day. I haven't been on a vacation since I started in AA, is because I see people, I see miracles every day in a church basement. Like, who would have thought? I see guys coming in who are so broken and just well enough to hold up a cup of coffee, and I watch them do better than me in 4 months. And like, I used to get resentful at that. But like, now I just see the God side of it, right? Because I can't see God working through my life. I've never been able to, right? Like, we live life forward and understand it backwards. So in hindsight, I can say like situations that yes, God absolutely showed up. But you tell me you can't see God working through these rooms and other people, I tell you that you're probably wrong. I've watched it, right? And I've had experiences where there was a guy who was living under a bridge with me in North Philly, and the first meeting I showed up to, right, he's there. And this guy's like, for you guys that have been to North Philly, like, this guy's like a freckled, red-haired dude, right? And he's like sitting on the porch on like the worst block in North Philly, like lived up there. And it was like this Bill and Ebby Thatcher situation where I like walked into a room and I'm like, Chris? And he's like, yeah, dude. And I'm like, what? This makes no sense. And he's like, I found God, dude. And I had an experience. And he's like, you can have it too if you want. Or you can, he said, the greatest thing about AA is when you walk out of the door, they will instantly refund your misery. Right? And that was like a situation I thought I'd never see, man. It's just the 12 step is the most beautiful thing in life because it's given me purpose. And I've been walking around purposeless since I was born, right? And like, that's a terrible way to live life, of having no reason to keep living, right? And I got stuck in that situation. I came into AA and I did a little work on myself. I found out that AA is the only place in the world that you come in a king and work your way up to a servant. And that was interesting to me, right? And like, I started putting in time and work and helping other people's, and yes, it was a struggle, right? I've gotten stuck on page 97 a bunch of times where I'm chasing sponsees and taking from other sponsees, right? And I've had situations where sponsees went back out and I felt terrible about it, like it was something I was doing wrong, right? And then my sponsor always tells me the Bill and Lois story, right? How, you know, the first 9 people he had in his house, the last one killed himself, and he goes to his wife and he's like, I don't think I'm doing something wrong. I shouldn't be doing this anymore. And she said, yeah, but you're still sober. And like, I had to go through a lot of different work and finding a lot of different angles, man, but I found my point and I held on to it, man, and that's why I've taken over 20 guys through the work, right? We've in turn taken 9 guys through the work, right? We've in turn taken 1 guy through the work, right? That's the greatest gift I've ever had in my life, and that's purpose. So thank you guys for letting me share.
Let's give him another. Whatever he said, right? Don't forget the meeting. After the meeting, hang out with us a bit, help us eat some of that food, take some of them CDs home, give them away to some people. I'm sure there's still somebody driving around with some CD players in your car. Use them up. What else we got? We got some stuff always going on every week. We'll see you next week. Let's close with the Lord's Prayer, and it's customary for us to form a line and thank our speakers personally. It means a lot to them. They come here at their own time and expense. Let's take a moment of silence, do with it whatever you care to do with it, and we'll end with the Lord's Prayer if you care to join us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power,